Happy Monday, LinkedIn post inbound here to talk about HubSpot adoption or, the lack thereof with Tony Dowling. How you doing, man?
I'm very well, very well. Thank you for asking. I don't know that it's ever a happy Monday, is it? But yeah, happy Monday to everybody out there. And what a time to talk about adoption after 3 days of just insane product updates. Was it 200 updates announced last week?
I think I saw that's what it says on the Spotlight page. 200. Wow. I know it was like 35 the week before inbound. They just started unloading. We heard a lot about it, and you're right. Probably recaps all week. Lots of things to unbox. Last night I did a recap with Nico, and I mean we spent an hour and a half just on the AI tool set, and there was a lot of other stuff. A lot of CRM activity, kind of stuff we've been seeing, for a while. I find myself having a hard time just because last year I did a lot of sessions that kind of dominated my schedule. Didn't make time to meet people and talk to people. So I switched it up this year and went to a few sessions, met a lot of people, interacted with a lot more people, and it was great. But one thing I was kind of like, an interesting dynamic is like, since we're in this every day, trying to determine whether you're going to learn anything at a specific session. Like, I don't want to get to the point where it's like, oh, I don't need to learn. I'm good. I know everything I need to know. Right. But it was interesting this year.
It's a good point. And I think I've gone over the hill in many ways. I'm over the hill. I've done the kind of the learning, probably all the learning I really want to do of the deep, dark HubSpot stuff, and I found myself increasingly interested in the adoption piece, right? In the strategic piece. So while I keep what we call over here a weather eye on everything that's going on, it's similar to, I would express it to when I was an MD, when I ran businesses. You sort of got to do a kind of spin all of these plates. You've got to have a general perspective of everything that's going on, but the ability to deep dive into something if you get really interested. So, for instance, the Breeze AI stuff. I'm deep into that now. We've just done an update ourselves. But I think that's a particularly useful skill for a generalist, for a senior manager especially. And I think it actually leads, this is what I wanted to get to in this conversation, Chris. It leads to part of the problem that we have with adoption in the HubSpot ecosystem, in the HubSpot universe, right? So many of us are more enthusiastically techie than the average person. Even I, as a non-tech, I'm relatively techie compared to most of the clients that we speak to. And I get really excited about Breeze AI and the new marketing home and the new lead scoring and all this kind of stuff, right? And I get into the intricacies of how you set up the buyer intent and so on and so on, right? But a lot of people, it just leaves them completely cold. Yeah. It's a bit like, I think the analogy would be, I drive a car, I don't need to know how the engine works. Right? I don't need to know how to repair it. I don't need to know I need to know where the fuel goes. I need to know where the air goes. I need to make sure my certifications are up to date, my license and my tax and those kind of things. But I don't know anything about the car, and I don't want to know anything about the car. Obviously, in some jobs, in some roles, that's really important. You need your mechanics, your admins. But at leadership level, and this is where adoption is driven, right? This is where adoption becomes really critical. At leadership level, it's probably not of too much interest to most of the senior leaders that we deal with. So there's two things happening here. There's one is that the fact that the ecosystem, including salespeople, are getting really excited about the detail. They get really excited about features. They get really excited about things that are happening, new stuff, and so on and so on. And we kind of overwhelm the customer. The customer sort of buys this excitement because buyers only buy when buyers believe. And they don't necessarily believe themselves, right? But they do believe that you believe. So if you're really enthusiastic, if you're really excited, they get really excited, right? And they'll buy into the product. They kind of think, shit, well, if this guy's that excited, this must be great. You know, if he's that enthusiastic, this must be good. So there's that issue. But the second issue is that, again, it just doesn't lead us into a conversation about adoption. It doesn't lead us into the strategic conversation, right? And in fact, I suspect it distracts from it, because everybody starts to talk about, do I need this feature? Do I have to pay extra for that one? Do I need the enterprise or the pro tier? How many seats do I need to get? If I want to get YouTube to work on my HubSpot, how to we get totally distracted away from the point of HubSpot, which is whatever the business is buying it for, you know. And so I think while it's a brilliant time of year for us HubSpot nerds, it's very pertinent, I think, that HubSpot started to talk about adoption. They started to talk about this easy, fast, and unified mantra, which is really important. So yeah, HubSpot's easy to use, it's fast to deploy and fast to learn, which it is. And obviously it's unified being the big thing. Now there are so many tools in HubSpot, all of which are based on the contact record. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But, you know, is that message, is it just becoming too noisy, too shiny? Is it in fact detracting from what I see our jobs as HubSpot partners, which is to get people into adoption?
Well, I think the challenge that we need to accept is that we've got to try and, as a trusted partner, at least, we've got to try and control the narrative a little bit, you know, coming out of an event like this. And I think the gut response is either, oh my God, we need to tell people about this. They need to know, and we just throw links at them, watch these videos, you know, or it's like, you guys aren't ready. I'm not going to tell you anything about this. So we're not even going to address it. Don't even bring it up. Right. And neither of those things work. Because like it or not, they're aware of what's happening. HubSpot does an okay job of making people aware of new stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to avoid this conversation, like as much as I would love to, you know, get people to focus on data model and process, I accept the fact that they're bombarded with this information and these new shiny things. And you know, it creates opportunity though when you say like, okay, there's no avoiding this, right? We have to figure out a way to deal with it, which means we can leverage it. And these are shiny objects. When presented in the right way, people will be motivated to do things differently sometimes. And when you can connect that to adoption, to process change, you know, to doing things better so that they can use these tools, there's a ton of opportunity there. But it's going to be largely based on, you know, the types of leaders that you're talking to, the departments that you're talking to. I've come up with a pretty hot take, I feel like, related to prospecting tools and SDR tools. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on, you know, what I just shared.
Yeah, I think there's two things that immediately spring to mind, and I think I'll start with the second one first, and perhaps go back to the first one. The stuff around the prospecting agents, the SDR tools, and things. My fear is, as with almost every other technology that I can think of, it has really good intentions, but it's just going to result in more crap. You know, when you read what the things like Clay and Gong and Zoom Info and Apollo and now HubSpot are doing with Clearbit and with Breeze Intelligence and all that kind of stuff, on the face of it, it looks fantastic, and part of me hopes that it'll just get better. Part of me hopes that, you know, we're just seeing the introductory phases of this stuff, and that it'll mature and become more valuable. But part of me thinks that lazy sales operations. I don't not necessarily blame salespeople here, because they usually do what their managers tell them to do, don't they? The lazy sales operations are just going to use them to spam people, and spam people now while they sleep. You know,
Yeah.
we're going to find ICP. We're going to find people that suit our prospecting benchmark, our prospecting framework, and we're just going to spam them. We're not even going to know that we've sent them an email. And we're going to do that 200 million times, and we're going to book 40 appointments, and then we're going to hit our target. It's an amazing thing. So I do worry about that from that perspective. But to go back to the first thing, I think a lot of this is actually about sequencing, and I can wrap those tools into this thought. Last week we did a fairly typical strategy day, and I get to this point where I'm in the meeting with the clients, and the clients are talking about the problems that they're facing, right? So what we do, we start with where do you want to be? We start with what are you hoping HubSpot is going to be able to achieve for you? You know, what are the objectives for this CRM project, right? And then we move into the where are you now? And then obviously the purpose of the exercise is, how do we cross from where you are to where you want to be, right? We call it the gap analysis. That's the HubSpot adoption gap that we've just identified. And these therefore are the plans that help you overcome that gap, right? And I have to sit on my hand. I get so excited. But I've learned that I have to sit on my hands and not offer the solutions, because it's all about the sequencing, right? Until the customer has clearly identified and not only what the problems are, but ownership of the problems, then they're not going to fix them. And blurting out the answers to all of their problems. Oh, you could do that with this. I mean, that's me all over. Oh my, you wait until you see this brand new HubSpot feature. It's going to blow your mind. And then before I know it, I'm off talking about features and benefits, and the client's sitting there. Yeah, they get excited, but it's like a leaf painting thing, right? So I could say, it's going to prospect for you while you're asleep. They're like, oh, you're fantastic. We never get to the point where we know what their ICP is. You know, so how are we going to get the adoption? So that I think this is the sequencing thing I'm talking about. You know, when we rush to the tools, and this is my problem with adoption as it sits in the HubSpot ecosystem today. I think we are far too likely to rush to solve for the client before taking the client with us, so they don't even understand what the problem is. It's a brilliant Metallica song with a line something along the lines of, not only do I not know the answer, I don't even know what the question is. And this is where we are with our clients, right? Until we pull that pain out of them to the point where they recognize and own it. So I'll give you a specific, I know I'm going on about, but I'll give you a very specific example, mentioning no names, hiding the people involved to save their embarrassment, right? Classic adoption scenario. So I say, so, Mr. Client, we don't want you working harder. We don't want you to do more things. We want you to work different. Yeah. No, totally get that. So the thing about HubSpot and the automation is, you know, once we've got these processes, we can refine these processes, remove these bottlenecks, automate some of these manual tasks, and we go into, we're going to save you a ton of time. Absolutely brilliant, fantastic. The trouble is, they say, we haven't got time to do that bit. How many times have you had this conversation with a client, right? How many times have you had this conversation? Now, the bit where it got really interesting is after peeling that onion back several times, we get to the point where we realize the very expression of the lack of time is potentially resistance to change in itself. So it's not actually the fact that they haven't got any time, which is a true fact. They don't have the time. Everybody's really busy. We're all really busy. But the fact that they're pushing back against the new processes is not because they haven't got time. It's because they're resistant to change. Do you see what I mean? This is where you go from up here understanding the problem and us pushing our agenda and us telling people what the solution is, to peeling it back and peeling it back and peeling it back until the client finally understands what the problem is. And generally, we're not doing that. And this is my hot take. You know, this is why I have a problem with us going into clients with frameworks and books and solutions and strategies that we pulled out of our minds and we've worked really hard on, and they're fantastic pieces of work. You can see that, but until the client is solving those problems themselves, they're not adopting.
Yes. Yeah. No, I always love /hate the lack of time. It's easy to challenge, but people generally don't like being challenged on, we all have the same amount of time. It's about priorities.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, if I told you I didn't have time to learn a manual transmission car, I would be lying to you. I just don't want to learn how to drive a manual transmission car.
We never had a choice. We've all manual over here. We're not allowed automatics.
Right.
But no, it's priorities. And this is the other thing we come up against. We go, so what's your priority? And we'll go, right, okay, so I'll go to this and then this and no.
Yeah.
A priority is one thing.
Right.
You can't have 15 priorities. You may have 15 things to do, but you don't have 15 priorities, right? So if your priority is to learn to drive that car, nothing else gets in the way of learning to drive that car because it's your priority.
That's true.
If you have a priority, if you've got 5 competing priorities, then that's bad management. Right? And that's why you don't get anywhere, because literally there's nobody standing at the front. You don't have leadership saying your priority is HubSpot. Your priority is learning a manual transmission. Your priority is building that lead score framework. Your priority is whatever it is that it's going to be. And this is, again, another contention of us when it comes to closing the gap. It's a leadership problem. It's rarely the people in the teams. It's because the leadership are expecting too much of people.
Yeah. And that's where
that's where it gets distracted.
As an advisor, coach, consultant, it's our job to kind of connect those dots, because usually there's some understanding of what it takes to grow right now, whether it's customer experience, whether it's, efficiency and effectiveness, like all those things. And all these tools, like of course, HubSpot can be connected to those things. And that's where, so the first thing we can do is connect to those goals. But then to get to those goals, we have the less tangible priorities of, change management and intentional cultures and all the things that lead to, the people hanging on to that lack of time for dear life.
And it is cultural. What that is the operative word. And I love all these little truisms I've picked up, right? But one of my favorite is either you manage the culture or the culture manages you. So if you're in a business and you are not managing the culture, you're making a mistake, because if you're a leader in the business, you have to. Otherwise, the culture will be created despite you. And then this is where you have the dangers of siloization. You have the dangers of competition within the team, not collaboration. You have all sorts of issues that if rise up if you don't manage it. And a HubSpot adoption is a classic example of a cultural impact. If you do this right, it's going to have an impact on the culture of your business. That's how important it is. And I think this is another thing. We come out with all of these features. We come out of Inbound and we're all rah, 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 look at it, this is fantastic. And everybody gets really excited. We don't talk about the difficult conversations, because it's just easier to sell it if we don't. It's just easier for the reps and for us to say, this is going to have a transformational effect on your business. Well, it will if you do it properly, but let's not talk about that for a minute, because that's really complicated, because that's change management, cultural change, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. I think, like you say, there's always a culture, there's always a process. It's just a matter of whether it's documented and intentional or not. And I think now with these tools, it's going to transform your business, whether you want it to or not. And what I'm afraid to see, and this is where I'll probably be banging this drum for the rest of the year at least, because especially in the reactive spaces, you hear of somebody doing more with less, right? And I heard a number of headcount comparisons while I was at Inbound. And like one of them was like, these tools, these service bots, like did the work of like 700, support specialists, but they had to do a lot of work to get the bots going because they didn't have their processes documented. And at that point, it's like maybe you needed 700 people because your process was shit, right? So these comparisons, I think it's a slippery slope. We're not comparing apples to apples when we talk about headcount. And that's the concern, right? Like you hear about this other company being able to slash their bottom line magically, margins magically exploded. And then you're like, oh, I got HubSpot too. I guess I'm just going to cut, this part of the team and just start using these tools. Like before I even know like what to do with them. Instead, your people are data entry clerks or they're doing low value tasks because you put them in a position to do low value tasks, not because they are low value.
Yeah.
Right. And when they're the closest to the customer, they have the most hidden value in the organization if they're buried in phones and emails and data entry. And in reality, they could be the ones impacting and should be the ones impacting improvements in customer experience, improvements in customer process more than anybody else. You just have to give them the space to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And like you say, they are making an impact on that customer experience, whether that's the way you want them to or not. And that's based on all sorts of things like their work environment, their remuneration and reward packages, the culture in the business, the tools they have, and so on. You said something there I really love, right? Your business is going to transform whether you want it to or not, right? You will either transform it or it will be transformed. That's the most powerful thing I think I've heard today, maybe even this week, certainly all through last Inbound, right? Unless you harness these forces, unless you grip up control of your business, unless you do some of the things that we're talking about today, like map your processes. Oh my God, it's not complex, is it? If you've got 700 agents, how many of them are there because they've had to, there are redundancies in the process, and you've had to add humans in there to fix these problems rather than fixing the symptoms of the problems, rather than going to the cause of the problem, right? So you will be transformed. The market will cheer you up and spit you up. The product of your competitor will smash you to pieces. The customer will vote with their feet. They just won't stay with you. And that, that's true of any kind of fundamental transformation, whether that was what we used to have in the UK. We had peasant farmers when they had the agrarian revolution foisted on, right? And when the agrarians were replaced by the industrial revolution, and now everybody's being replaced by the digital revolution. Transform or die, Chris. It really is that fundamental.
Yeah.
And either you do it for yourself or it will be done to you. I love that. That's my new t-shirt. I'm going to get a t-shirt with that on it.
Yeah, I wrote it down just to keep track of it. Thank you. I got to keep track of these nuggets. Yeah, man, it's I just try to find different ways to explain this stuff or reason, or help bring insight. And like, you could probably, obviously a ton of businesses got away with not digitally transforming. They still do. They still have paper processes all over the place. But this is where I think the more that Google, the more that the personal life starts to include AI, like you can't cut off your team, because digital transformation needed you to let's say you're in a spreadsheet and you've got all your customers and you just all of a sudden you want to use I heard HubSpot's cool. Let me sign up for a free CRM. You still got to learn to do everything yourself. Right. Yeah. Now you just start using AI and it will teach you.
Yeah.
And like, that's where either the employees will take it upon themselves because you're putting them in that position to do these things. And they could very easily do it terribly, especially salespeople under quotas and, SDRs under quotas, all that stuff.
And under pressure, not just
Right.
under quota, under pressure.
Yeah. And same thing on the customer success side. Or like, you can have a little intention, like understand you can't avoid what's coming. Because I think we're gonna, like, just the overall process, and like my hot take related to all the SDR and prospecting bots, and it's always been just the whole SDR motion has always not sat well with me. I think I just avoided really digging deep into it. But as I was, this came up with George on Thursday night, I'm like, okay, so the goal, especially as we think about humanity and understanding that that's the part that AI can't replace, so we can't forget about that, use AI for all the admin stuff. If our goal, like, to sell stuff is, and let's say marketing's doing its job of convincing and educating, and sales is there to help you buy. And through that, we want to connect, we want to have conversations, and we want to build relationships. Humans are the ones, in theory, that will be building the best relationships. And if first impressions are so powerful, why are sales guys only going to be available at the close? Like, if we've done the job up front, if we built the great relationship, that should be the part that AI can step in and make it as seamless as possible. And the anything with development in it, like sales development rep, business development rep, why in the world would we take the human out of that part?
What
Makes zero sense.
What a great point. We used to say it's almost old-fashioned. It's almost retro, because we used to say if you do your job right, the close will happen. A close is no more technical than asking the customer to buy. It's literally as simple as that. A robot could do that.
Right.
But talking to somebody and identifying within the context of their business, the answers they're giving you, the conversation you're having, the humor you exchange, the relationship you build, identifying that potential opportunity, and then nurturing that over a period of time until it flares up into an actual opportunity that is utterly human. That is utterly human. I remember a lady who bought from me in my first sales gig, a year after I started calling on her. This is back in the day of face-to-face. I used to, boot leather. I used to knock on doors. And I asked her, why did you buy? And she said, well, I just got used to you. It had nothing to do with the product. It had nothing to do with my price or discount or anything else. It's solely that relation. And I'm not saying all sales are like that by any means, right? But it is a fundamental question here. This has also bothered me about the inbound methodology, right? If we're going to buy into it, if we're going to become customer centric, we shouldn't have sales in that interruptive manner. Marketing is about raising awareness of your problem, educating people as to what you can provide for them, how they should buy it. They ask you answer how much it's going to cost, how to work out how much it's going to cost for them, and so on and so on and so on. And sales really is service. Sales is helping you buy it, right? So why are we interrupting people and bothering them? Because we don't buy inbound. We don't buy the customer centricity.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge can there. And I know you've had conversations with George about this before, and I totally get it, totally accept it. In many ways, sales sell despite themselves.
Oh yeah, like stop closing. Stop trying to close. Like, you won already.
It's coincidence sometimes that they stumble across these opportunities, right? And it just so happens that it seems to be cheaper to keep mining those coincidences than to do the marketing and the inbound properly and to create it with humans. I'd love to find an organization that doesn't sell from that perspective, who services the customer, who answers their needs, provides them purely with the best way to purchase. I don't know if one exists. That's your challenge. That's your homework for the week.
Yeah.
Does anybody know of somebody who doesn't sell in the way that we're talking about with SDRs and development reps and interruption?
Right.
Well,
that's why like most manufacturing companies are still there in terms of like full funnel reps. Like, and sometimes they prospect, sometimes they don't. But usually their prospecting is just like going to the next show, driving around. And that's where, like, as I'm just thinking out loud, like development is a key word. And like, we got to find a way to bring valuable salespeople into this journey, right? And we shouldn't have to call it marketing. This is why revenue teams, you hear about that. Like, can we just have everybody be revenue development reps and then be like done with it? Like,
or customer service. I've often thought that. Why isn't everybody just customer service?
Right.
Or customer success, which is a brilliant term. It's a brilliant term. We're here to help you succeed with our products. Right. Whatever that means, whether I'm designing comms or I'm helping you over the line or I'm solving your problems that you have with the product afterwards, we're all about your success. I love that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. No, I think there's going to be a lot of innovating. And this is where like we could do a ton of great work by helping businesses innovate the orgs in order to take advantage of this stuff. Like when you try to apply these new tools to the old way of doing things, it's just not work. Like heaven forbid you try to rebuild your paper process. I've seen that so many times. Like you rebuild your paper process into the digital system and then you lose all traceability because everybody needs an editable Word doc as the outcome. And then they change everything. And it's
everybody's printing stuff out. And
why do we spend
on the
so
screen
much money on this thing? But yeah, man, I think that's takeaway here. Like it's hard not to be excited, after inbound. You should be excited. They're putting a lot of effort in all these AI tools we talk about. Like instead of pressing the button and expecting them to do all the work, let them do the things. Like if we're talking about the prospecting, like the research part is super, super valuable. The list building, super, super valuable. Even the first draft of the emails. Now you take that email, do the 1-minute video of yourself that you've always known you should be doing and again never had time for. And now take that opportunity to make it the most personalized outreach that they're going to receive that day. Like it's easier than ever, right? And if you think that these tools are just going to kind of bring in the easy win sales where you just hit close, or you think that, oh, my value is as a closer, like, no, your value should be in relationships. Like that's the value, building the trust.
100%. And it's the only way to differentiate. And that's the heart of marketing.
So if you're looking for adoption of these new tools, start with adoption of the rest of the platform and talk to leadership, connect the dots, find the goals, find the opportunity, and let's grow. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks.